Thank you. That was very generous. Thank you. So this is a marshmallow. I don't want any of my panelists to be distracted, but I'm just going to put it here. And at the end of this session, we're going to have a little a lightning round where you're going to propose your best prediction of what's going to happen over the next 5 years in financial inclusion, the really big breakthrough, and the winner gets the marshmallow. So don't think about it till the end because, really we've got some important things we're going to discuss here. So Sendhil has given us a really entertaining and insightful setup to this topic, and our challenge now, over the next 40 minutes or so, is to explore what this means. I'm sure everyone in the room is thinking, wow, that was really great, that was so interesting. I wonder what it means for financial inclusion. And the questions started to bring this out. You were giving us some teasers about emergency loans and just giving cash and so on. We have here a panel of experts who are innovating on financial inclusion and who are really digging deep on understanding customers and figuring out not just what's the killer app product, but what's the service package that's really going to speak to their circumstances of scarcity. And I love the analogy you use in the book of, I'm in the tunnel, I'm trying to manage day to day. Top of mind for me is how do I manage my cash? And so the question is, how do financial services come into the tunnel and help solve those problems? And then are there ways that perhaps they can extend the view down the tunnel or open it up a little bit so that long-term planning, other kinds of desirable behavior are really possible? So we have a great panel of practical and engaged people who've themselves been serial innovators in making markets like the one for financial services, but not only financial services, work better for consumers. So I'm going to start. Tine Wollebekk came to Telenor with a background in the card and banking industries. She's a senior vice president and head of financial services within Telenor Digital. She'll tell us about that. And among other roles, she chairs the board of Tamir Bank, and she's also on the board of Micro Ensure. So she's got quite a broad knowledge. And she started a foundation in Kenya, at the Kenya Business School, to support startups. So that's what she does in her free time. Kamal Quadir is the CEO of bKash, which is a mobile money startup in Bangladesh. And previously, he started something called Sell Bazaar that was trying to address what he described as a key pain point for very small businesses. And that is, how do we access a fairer and more easy to get to market for our goods and services? And he has called the mobile possibly the most powerful democratized tool in the history of mankind. So we might debate that modest statement later and see how he's put it to use in bKash. Bill Gajda is the global head of strategic partnerships for Visa. And Bill, we are especially grateful to. He led the Financial Inclusion 2020 roadmap process for the technology stream, which was quite an important one. He's been a senior leader and manager for years. I got exhausted just reading your resume, sorry. But he was recently reminded of the limits of his executive control and probably his fluid intelligence by his 3-year-old who said, let's be honest, you're not the boss of me. So lest we be too impressed, we need to, to sort of put it in perspective here. So first, we're going to take a look at client-centric research, segmentation, all these the new buzzwords, and what's really different. And Bill, you've talked a lot in the past about structuring the operating model around the customer, making strategic decisions in a business, about products that use better forms of segmentation, including possibly behavioral ones instead of just demographic ones. You've invested in your current role in a number of kind of deep pieces of consumer research. Can you help us understand what's really different in this new customer-centric research? And you might win a marshmallow if you make some good connections to the scarcity arguments.
Right, well that may be a stretch, but that was fascinating, by the way. I would say, first of all, I think that the research that we've done, and we've been conducting research on financial inclusion for several years, alone and in partnership with Frog Design and other partners. And I would say there's been a couple insights. First of all, for Visa, I think that's caused us to think fundamentally differently about the markets that we all talk about. People may realize Visa operates in about 200 countries, and in fact, we've operated in most of these developing markets, in some cases for decades or at least a decade. Primarily, though, for the wealthy and the international traveler. And so I think the research in terms of what's happening in these markets has caused us to think very differently about geographies that we thought we understood very well. Right, so I think it's broadened the way that we think about our markets. And then beyond that, though, it's caused us to think differently fundamentally about our business model. So if you think about Visa, for 50 years, we've really been partnering with financial institutions on the one hand to both serve clients with accounts and cards and merchants with merchant accounts, and we're the network in the middle. Right? But dependent, I mean, Visa is entirely dependent on the fact that there's a source of liquidity that we can attach an account to. When you go to these markets, you realize it's the 200 plus mobile money schemes that are primarily led by mobile operators or organizations like bKash working in conjunction with banks. And so we've also had to think very differently about who our primary customers are, who our partners are, and in fact, think about getting into different lines of business. So when we bought Fundamo 2.5 years ago, it was because we came to the realization that we couldn't just be the network in the middle supporting sources of liquidity that already existed. We had to get involved in providing or making more robust those sources of liquidity to have a foundation for accounts in the first place. And so I'd say as a result of a lot of experience on the ground, some research we've done with partners, some trial and errors, that we've learned a lot about the differences it takes to operate in these markets compared to our traditional business model, both in terms of where we play in the ecosystem, how we view the markets when they operate, and basically what this broader customer base looks like for us. So it changes very much.
Tell me something really cool I didn't know that you learned that you applied on the ground.
Okay, so we talk about the value of the agent network, right? And there's going to be a lot of discussion, there already has been today, about how fundamentally important robust agent networks are to the success of these things. I think the thing that we've learned, though, is that while that's true, where we've put in some markets, in its very early days, this mobile-based account that relies on these physical agents, and a companion card as well, a traditional Visa card that you can use at ATMs or a limited number of merchants in some of these markets or to making e-commerce, that people's ability to understand the utility of this versus the utility of this and what happens at an ATM machine, and to grow their basket of goods that they pay electronic payments for, because it's a bit clunky to use a phone at a merchant, but it's kind of really easy to swipe your card. Once you provide this base level, I think, of financial services, primarily through the mobile, very quickly people's needs become more sophisticated. And it's why we talk today not just about airtime top-up and peer-to-peer transfers, microinsurance, micro-lending, right? This is where this stuff is going. And so I would say that very quickly, once you provide this foundational source of liquidity and a secure way to transfer money, people look a lot like the bank people and have those kind of requirements.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So Tine, you need to give us a little background on EasyPesa and tell us a bit what you've learned. In particular, were there things that the team thought they knew about customers and what they wanted going in that proved to be just not correct? And where is your thinking right now on the real value proposition for the different customer segments that you have?
EasyPesa is the system in Pakistan that we have developed together with Tamir Bank, that we also have a majority ownership in. And it is over-the-counter P2P and bill pay mainly. We're moving into mobile accounts. And I think the speech you had, Sendhil, was really, really interesting. And it actually gives a very good perspective of what it's like to build something like this. We built this from the scratch. And it is, I was not personally a part of it, but I am very involved with the bank now, of course, leading the board. What we see is that it really boils down to details. It's very nice with the big strategies and all the concepts, but at the end of the day, it's very, very small things. So it's all about operational excellence. And I think I certainly recognize the fact that people where money is a scarce resource, they are very smart with money. So they understand everything. So for example, a very important thing for A mobile financial services network is obviously agents. So we have many 100,000 agents, and we choose the best ones for also being agents for not only the SIM card, but also for financial services. And they are extremely good cash managers. So I would say that they would probably overdo most of us in terms of understanding the cash flow that they do each day and how they can extend their funding so that they can do even more turnarounds on their money during the day. So that's something I think we should keep in mind when we talk about these things, that it's nothing to do with how to capture a concept. It's obviously to do with what you focus on. And I must say, just from what you said today, when you have your cash and you know exactly how much you have in your pocket or your wallet or whatever, you have full control. So why put it into a mobile? Why would you do that when you can have it in your pocket and you have full control? And you can go and pay whatever it takes you. I mean, even swiping a card, I'm sorry to say, but it's actually even easier just to give you the few rupees or whatever over the counter. So I think that's something we really have to overcome to make that understand that yes, when you are in a society where all the money are digital, like we are used to, then of course it's easier with the card and the phone and everything. But when you are in a country where nothing is digitalized, it's really not that obvious. But there are many reasons for doing it anyway, because there is the whole fundament for getting money into formalized channels, the security aspect. And I think financial inclusion, I just want to take that as something we also drive, is it's both a payment thing, transaction setup, and it's also a financial savings and lending setup. So these are parallel, and I think it's important to keep both in mind. And obviously, building a history, credit history for people, that's probably one of the largest financial inclusion aspects we can have, like the former panel talked about big data. So what we learned is really the operational excellence, that the details, it's very, very challenging. And then it's about patience. If you are into a normal setup of business where you want to do your return on investment and you have your CFOs to report to, then it will be killed. It takes a long time, and that's something that we really realized, and I'm happy to say that we have that environment with Telenor, that we are in it for the long run and we go into these difficult markets. When it comes to the customer insight as such, I think it is that the uptake is huge when they see this. And we went into exactly the same agents, the newspaper stall, the grocery store, and that's where we implemented the service. And that's where it should be implemented, because the banks are intimidating for this customer group.
So let's just, because not everyone in the room is maybe familiar with EasyPesa. So we have Telenor, global telco, that acquired a microfinance bank and then has developed agents over the country and currently is selling over-the-counter and mobile wallet, mainly payment and money transfer services.
Yes.
Is that correct?
So far we've had 100 million transactions and I think $1.5 billion of it.
And the number of customers and the percent that are active, can you give us a...
Yeah, I think we have 6 million active customers a month. I must say, I think we also get a little bit more into that, but on the customer journey, it's quite demanding, because you have to be very close to customers' needs. And I personally drive this with our people, talking about gaps in the market. There has to be a gap. There has to be some need. And obviously sending money to 1,000 kilometers to the other end of the country is a need. And you would like to save those 3 days of a bus ride to give those money. But when you move beyond that to the mobile account, where you should store your money, then it's all about if you have a salary or if you have a government grant, if you have a savings, that you can put that into the account. And that is another customer journey, and it's more demanding, and that's exactly the point we're at now.
Okay, so very helpful. We'll probably come back to this. You've described the psychology of, I've got cash in my pocket, it works fine. I'm really busy. What's broken? Then, yeah, I could send money. That I can see that, all right, that's now in the tunnel. And then I think what you're saying is it's still to be tested. How do you bring then these other enhanced services into the tunnel to be relevant? What's your experience?
Well, I mean, myself as a practitioner of technologies in very poor environment, what we find is that if you put together the right technology, poor adopts it very fast.
Actually, I'm going to ask you to pause and just describe bKash again.
Well, bKash is a mobile financial service. It's regulated by central bank, and it's with a very low-end mobile phone, something as cheap as $20. You can do all the transaction that you would be doing at an ATM. Now, in absence of ATMs in poor countries like Bangladesh, we have 75,000 human ATM. So the human a network of agents are maintaining the liquidity, and you have a live wallet, and which is your mobile phone, and the way you instruct your ATM and say, withdraw $500 for me from my server, from my account in a bank server, you also instruct with a mobile phone to a human ATM, and that's the way the transaction takes place. And in a country like Bangladesh, where we have 160 million people, we have around 8 million customers today. So we have still 152 million to go. And we do around 25 million transactions per month. It has grown perhaps the fastest deployment of any technology in the country's history. Visa works with us in terms of the platform. So it has been a fascinating journey in that sense.
So you said something interesting when we were talking on the phone, which I think speaks to this, what's in the tunnel. You said that in Bangladesh, bKash has become a verb. Hey, I'll bKash you. So that's kind of a striking thing. Can you talk a little bit about what was the most powerful need that was being met in this context of scarcity? I mean, what really made this top of mind?
Yeah, what Sendhil's presentation was quite, he articulated so well what we face in reality every day. It's basically addressing pain point, okay? Bangladesh might be a country of as big as Wisconsin, but again, as I said, it's a country of half the US population. So coming from rural place to urban place is the most common way of earning money. And when you spend half of your day sending back that money, you waste a tremendous amount of productive working hours. So if you can send that money back in a very quick way to your loved ones, that way you save money, you save time, you spend that time on further productive activities. So that is just one aspect of having a mobile wallet. You can send money to another person very quickly. So when we deployed that, it worked like a wildfire. And we work in Bangladesh with a large NGO called BRAC, which has a network all over the country. So we also grew very fast, okay? So we built our own agent network. And agent network, it's an interesting thing. This room, I'm sure, full of people who has been studying this thing. Distribution, it may sound quite a complicated thing, but it's actually, it all depends how you want to see it. How complicated do you want to make it? I mean, while we find distribution is a challenging thing, but even 200 years ago, the remotest rural part of Indian village got matchboxes. How did that matchbox go there? Okay, some kind of distribution worked. So those distributors, 200 years ago, used to distribute matchboxes. 100 years ago, they started distributing tobacco, Coca-Cola, Nestle product, Unilever product, airtime products. Now they're distributing airtime, electronic money. So by engaging this electronic money distributor, as well as creating a need, meeting a need for the people who had the pain point, okay, and bringing it within a regulated environment, it gave people the confidence And one interesting thing about technology is that it might be intimidating for poor people or people with lack of literacy, but that's a problem for entrepreneurs and solution provider to solve. If we can create the right application, if we can create the right way of presenting them, poor participates very, very effectively. I mean, I'll give an example of Cell Bazaar, which is basically a platform where it's like Craigslist over mobile phone. Okay? And when I went to Bangladesh to implement this thing, I had a small car, no air condition. I'm just traveling around, talking to people all the time, explaining how to do this thing, how we are doing all this stuff. And one day, my illiterate driver, he told me that it's going to work. And I said, how do you know? And he really reminded me of this incident today. And he said, well, you know, I made $2 yesterday by selling my old Nokia phone to somebody. I used Cell Bazaar. I heard from you how to do this thing, and I applied this thing. If I can do it, I mean, there are people more educated than me. They can able to do this thing as well. Okay, and I think that's what the main trick is, that if we can create the right application, you know, we talk about in the mobile money space. When we first started learning this thing from Kenya, we heard this term SIM toolkit. That without SIM toolkit, this thing is not possible. Okay, you need to have a SIM toolkit. Well, after 2 years, we started hearing a new term called USSD. Without USSD, this thing is not possible. Okay, and now we are seeing all these new apps are coming. Okay, in a poor country like Bangladesh, we deploy the entire thing with USSD, and Telenor is one of our partners who is working with us there. The apps are moving so fast. The cheap, not so known brand handsets, which can run Android system, will move things so fast that many of these limitations that we talk about, whether it's a SIM toolkit, whether it's USSD, will go away. Well, maybe there will another complication will develop, but I'm saying it's going through an evolution, and in general, poor people will adopt this thing very fast. I mean, I find my iPhone actually very cumbersome to do mobile money. It's a $20 cheap Nokia phone is far more effective to do that.
All right, now save your predictions, because you might be putting your marshmallow at risk if you share too much at this point. All right, Sendhil, I'm going to put you on the spot to share something you think that they're missing or something that's striking you out of these explanations. You get a minute to think about it. Each of you, you're going to have to give a grade from 1 to 10 on two things. We look at, there are hundreds of mobile money deployments out there. And so give them a grade. 1 is pretty pitiful. 10 is, wow, that's really awesome. In terms of uptake. And then I want you to give them a grade on usage. And then I want you to give them a grade on likelihood in the next year that very many customers will use another service on that platform. All right? And the audience gets to play along with this first. So what is your grade on uptake? So the extent to which customers are letting the kinds of services on offer into the tunnel.
I want to say by uptake that to me, uptake is to actually have your money placed in the account.
Okay, so what the money is there. Because that's been at least one transaction, let's say.
Yeah, okay, one transaction, then the uptake is great. If it's just using the
so there are several hundred deployments, and on a scale of 1 to 10, how are they doing on that basic measure?
Well, you can't have a general. There are only 14 successes according to GSMA. I'm sorry to say that.
Let's divide
they are
several
doing
hundred by 14, and it's maybe a 2 or 3 or so.
They are doing 10, and the others are doing 0. Okay. That's the hard fact.
Well, I would say
on average.
See, I would say, if I look at the service as a whole, not just cash in, I think the agent network is an extremely important piece. Without that ecosystem, nothing takes place. Okay.
Okay.
And I think I would give agent network, the most critical grade.
Like, for instance,
I would say at least 7.
7. Okay. All right. So we have on average, 2, 3. for people do something with the account or with the service. 7 on the agent network. Do you want to? No one wants to actually answer the question,
No,
so you might as well say your own question and answer it.
Yeah, exactly. I won't. I'll try not to restate the question, but I'll certainly restate my answer. I think the important thing isn't the number today; it's the difference between the number today and what you said a year from now. So I could argue, on average, it's a 2 or a 3. There are 14 or 15 successful deployments on 180 or so that are struggling. We'll have a different answer next year. It'll be a 3 or a 4, and it'll be a 4 or 5. And it's the tipping point that we've got to watch for.
All right. So Susie likes that answer.
Well,
so everybody in the room who's more at the optimistic end of the spectrum, of the current deployments, how you'd rate them? Would you rate them better than a C, better than a 5? Would you stand up, please? Oh, I'm sorry. You didn't really persuade people. All right. And what about, just a quick observation on the pace at which people are going to adapt, learn, start using additional services? You mentioned, for instance, credit, insurance, deposits.
To me, it's very much of a hockey stick. I think that's because
a hockey stick.
Yeah, I mean, it goes on for a long while and nothing really happens,
so.
and then it really suddenly just picks up with an enormous pace.
Okay.
And that's what I think happens, because there is this ecosystem networking effect play where it becomes relevant where there are enough players into the market.
I think it's all about product designing, okay? Because so for example, the reason everybody loves sending money home or send money application, because that's the low-hanging fruit, okay, and that's easy to develop. You don't need to do anything, just a basic communication, okay, and then you see it very steep rise, and because we have designed that product effectively, okay. But if we design, for example, we are doing microfinance repayment in Bangladesh, and it's going quite well without any flaw, without any mistake. So if we design the, if merchant payment, for example, we have not pushed it very hard. No deployment has pushed it very hard yet, okay? If you really design it well, okay, that why the merchant will be accepting electronic money and what benefit they will get out of this thing, okay? If you share some value with them, okay, then in poor countries, instead of carrying the money in the pocket, okay, people would be rather carrying the money in the wallet, because, that's where I want to add a point that, Tina, you were mentioning, is people actually want to carry the money in the wallet if they know that they can get the money out anytime, anywhere, okay? One of the reasons we carry cash, because we have this insecurity that in case I need this cash, I would not be able to get anything else. If I'm carrying a plastic or wallet, I would not be able to get my cash in my hand. But if I see agents everywhere in every corner, okay, and people are accepting electronic money as well, then they will accept electronic money over other things. So if we can design the merchant product that you can make payment, I think that's we are going to see hockey stick there as well.
All right. Now you've had time to think. Do you have some advice?
The question was, why am I so well dressed? Was that the question, or?
No, it was, why haven't you gotten the marshmaillo yet?
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, yes. But advice, observations.
So I guess I'd give 2 very related observations. The first is, I think that if I think about mobile, and I thought your point about pain points was exactly right, is that it clearly is addressing a very immediate pain point that the poor are very focused on. So in that sense, you give them a benefit there, uptake will be through the roof. But I worry we're going to walk back through what happened with microfinance. That is, microfinance addressed an immediate pain point, the need for credit. And then once we saturated that, what we called other needs, which were genuine needs, microinsurance or savings, they are needs, but they're not pain points. They are abstract needs that have diffuse benefits, but are never the things you want to do right now. It's like cleaning your office is a thing that you want to do, but it's never the thing you want to do right now. And I think mobile payment is going to hit that same barrier. It's going to be exactly that issue of, yes, we can deal with the immediate pressing things, but if we're trying to expand out to these other things that don't actually their wants, their desires. They're not pain points right now. How do we get to that? And I think that'll be the challenge. And that's related to my second point, which is I actually think that is a goal both for mobile but all of financial inclusion, because I could see in 5 years, 10 years, there being a dramatic change in how people think about poverty all around. Because if you take some of these results on IQ and self-control, you could imagine a world where all of the people right now talking about education, why aren't the poor able to work with their kids and send their kids to school, all the people out there in public health, all of that, they may eventually come back looking to finance. They may eventually come back and say, ultimately, wow, if we can solve these financial problems of smoothing and things like that, we can move the needle as much as adding a teacher in a school. And that's the sense in which why I think these other bigger questions are so revolutionary. To me, it puts finance at the center of all of development, of all of poverty, and raises the stakes, because you could imagine an impact evaluation 5 years from now that said, we found a way to solve this financial needs, these pressing needs, and guess what? People were better parents, people took their meds more. It's not how you think of finance, but I think that because it's there, I think we have to figure out how to get past these pain points to these genuine wins that I think we can have.
All right, so mobile money, yes, meets immediate needs, makes life more convenient. Emergency loans, you've said this, and I think what you're saying is you're kind of punting on long-run savings and insurance.
No, I think it's that we have to take product design seriously, much like you talked about product design at the design level, where you're talking about how you interface. I think there's another cognitive interface with every product we have, which is not about what buttons we push, but it's about how does this product look to me, given that right now I'm focused on just making it through today to resolve these issues. How can I create these products that look good within the tunnel? And I think that will be something that I think it'll require a change in mindset in the way we design. Because to us, looking at from the outside, it feels like pain points, equivalent pain points, but they're only equivalent pain points because you're looking at the entire balance sheet. Insurance feels like a real pain point because it's like, wow, look at the volatility if you can insure people. But it's not today's pain point. In fact, if you look at financial advisors in the US and you look at the advice they give people who are like struggling to make ends meet, the Wall Street Journal had one of these. The advice they gave was, raise your deductible. It's a terrible idea if you had very little money, the person who needs the most insurance. But why does raising the deductible seem so attractive? Well, it saves some money right now, and tomorrow, well, whatever, something may happen. So in that sense, insurance is a great example of a genuine need, but not a pain point. And I think it's going to be, the product design problem is going to be, how do you take these things and make them into something that looks good given the pain point? Does that make sense? So I'm not punting. I am punting, yes, but I'm punting.
I thought
I'm
so.
hoping to kick it very far when I punt.
Yes.
How's that?
Great. Great. So I'm going to give the panel a chance to see if anyone wants to react. But can we get the 2 microphones placed with people in the audience who want to make a comment or ask a question? 2 questions. And then we'll get reactions while we're getting the microphones out there. And then we're going to go to our predictions market, looking to the future. So did any of you want to comment on what Sendhil was saying in terms of implications for your business model, how you think things will unfold?
I think the pain point is very important, what I described as gaps in the market. Because gaps is different from kind of unmet need. Gaps is something that you also as a customer have identified yourself, and that's the same. So I think it's a good expression to, it's really about pain points. The rest is, as you say, abstract.
I mean, I want to make a comment is that I shared this story earlier once, that I met one of a bKash user one time, and she told me that she receives money from her husband and son on a regular basis, and she says, great, it's really making my life wonderful. At the same time, I mean, as we are passing by, she said, well, it's great, but we should not use it too frequently. And that intrigued me, and I said, like, what do you mean? And she's this ultra poor person saying this thing. And she said, well, I used to see my husband, son once a month, once in 2 months, but now I don't see them frequently. So fundamentally, those actual needs are sometimes not very obvious. I mean, yes, once we meet the primary pain point, there's a deeper level of issues that we need to address. At the end of the day, everybody is pursuing happiness. So I think that's where I think, Sendhil, what you're saying makes larger sense. It's not just making an application, but also understanding the secondary needs and deeper needs.
Mm-hmm. Do we have some questions, comments in the audience?
Okay. Yeah, so hi, this is Camilla Nestor from Grameen Foundation. A question for Sendhil and also for Kamal. I'm curious, Sendhil, whether you discovered any gender differences in how people deal with scarcity. I'm thinking specifically around sort of ability or bandwidth to learn new things. And sort of related question for Kamal around your practical experience with bKash's 8 million users, whether you're seeing any gender differences.
And I'm going to ask Bill also to comment on that because of your work on Women. Was there one more comment or question? Monique? Or I'm sorry, do we have a microphone over here already?
Over here.
Yes.
Sorry, Tim Ogden from the Financial Access Initiative. Just a question about the pain points in mobile money and cash is that the pain point of managing cash is primarily a problem for people who have a lot of it and don't want to carry a lot of it around. And that the history of movement to electronic forms in other places started way up the income ladder and moved down. It didn't start at the bottom and move up. So why not look at doing that same thing in these environments and focus more at the upper tiers of the middle class and push it down than trying to deal with a cash problem of people who don't have very much cash and they're not bearing the costs of cash, somebody else is.
We're going to take that as a suggestion to all of us, but not try to answer it right here. And one last question. Monique is in possession of the microphone. All right. Short question.
It's a short question. I would agree with Sendhil that poverty is a really important driver of how people adopt cell phone and branchless banking. But nobody's talked about risk. And yet, from the point of view of the poor, who aren't in banking and aren't in technology, we're asking them to take a leap of faith. And we're asking them to take a leap of faith, and they look at this and probably think, this is kind of risky business for me. And maybe they think, but it might help me manage risk. So how do you get to the point where you build the trust and confidence that people will take this up, and what do you do?
Okay, so I'm going to exercise some executive control here. Two people want to comment like in one sentence or so on the gender issue. That won't really do it justice, but it's a topic we're going to come back to. And then what about this issue of technology, trusting technology? Two people get that. So who wants gender?
I can give a specific answer to Camille.
Okay. To Camilla.
Yeah. So we found quite disappointingly even though there are a lot of women are using bKash, the disproportionate number of the women's participation is, in terms of registration, is much lower. And when we did a research on that, what we found is that women don't want to share their phone number to agents. And we are now working on female agents. So there's a privacy issue as well as other social connotation. So that's one finding that we have. And I can, for the sake of time, we can talk about it in detail.
And Bill, can you share any quick insight from the Women research? And then people who want to hear really fascinating set of comparative country studies on the gender dimensions of mobile money should find Bill later.
Right. I think Kamal's right in pointing out the adoption issue, but it's contrary to where actually the money management is in many of these households and where the kind of higher order needs are. So in many cases, obviously the men are working and making the money, but the concerns about saving and the longer term views and household management tend to be more women, which is why we focus a lot of our programs working with the GSMA, Cherie Blair Foundation, and others on specific programs for women in the unbanked, because I think they have a disproportionate lack of that current involvement and probably need in many markets.
Great. Okay. So stand up. And Tine, can you give your prediction?
Yeah, I think it's really...
sorry, excuse me. Audience, you're going to vote to see who gets the marshmallow. All right, so Tina, really give it a good pitch here.
Sure. I think now we have 90% distribution of mobile phones in these markets. And I think we will go and see exactly the same on mobile financial services in a few years' time. I'm quite bold on this.
So use of mobile finance will catch up with the ubiquity of mobile.
I think the mobile network operators and financial service operator will be working more closely to offer a more broader and complete service.
I'd say that the gaps in 5 years, the gaps between how we view sophisticated markets and developed markets will shrink considerably. Smartphones for $20, $30 with Android, mobile point of sale, bringing plastic back into the equation, where 3 years ago I would have said they won't even have plastic, they'll just use their mobiles exclusively. I think that a market like Bangladesh and a market like Canada or the United States are going to look way more similar in 5 years than they do today.
All right, so Convergence Prediction, you get to go too.
On mobile, oh great. I think since so much of the issues around this is around trust, I think what we'll see is we'll see in one country in the next 5 years a major run, the equivalent of a bank run. And it will be the equivalent instead here, because it's about liquidity, to be about can the individual points have enough liquidity to sustain the run, and more importantly, how will the regulators in that country manage that run? And I think how that regulator responds, what happens with that run, will be the equivalent of the Andhra Pradesh crisis for microfinance, and I think will determine in many ways the arc and growth of this sector.
Scandal. All right. So here's how
I'm
the voting
audience,
works. Here's how the voting works. If any of you did not see Queen for a Day when you were growing up, even in reruns, so I put my hand over each of the candidates and you applaud. The applause-o-meter will decide who gets the marshmallow, all right? So will it be 90% adoption and usage? Will it be Kamal's vision of telcos and banks and other players in the system working more closely together? There's something for everyone in that option. Will Canada look like Bangladesh? Is that what you said? Yeah. Will we have a scandal? It's rigged. You get the marshmallow. Thank you all very much. Thank you to our panel.
Thank you very much.
Okay.